I'm just not ready to do it, guys. I'm not ready to say goodbye to 2023 in the world of college football because this was, beyond belief, a special season for fans everywhere, whether it be a transfer quarterback that nobody believed in winning the Heisman Trophy down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, saying goodbye to an entire conference and welcoming 8 new teams to a playoff and 4 new teams to the Big Ten and 2 new teams to the SEC. I'm not ready to embrace what's coming. So I won't just yet. We'll continue to recap what exactly happened in 2023. So today, let's go ahead and break down my top 10 teams at the end of the year for 2023. But if you are new here, welcome on into the channel. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, and I talk college football daily. So if this is the type of content you enjoy, plus a bunch of other nonsense that we'll be talking about, simply because the clock has struck 0 down at NRG Stadium, does not mean we are going to stop making content. We will be here every single day, a bunch of new stuff coming. We got a banner. We're going to start doing live shows next week. So make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, your best of bros, the drunk dude passed out at a Waffle House parking lot, college football aficionado fans everywhere about this channel, because we are on the race to become the #1 show talking college football daily. Go ahead and give me a follow on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. Okay, so audible mentions before we get to our top 10, as I always do. Man, this sucks. I don't want to start doing this. I actually love talking about these rankings every single week. But honorable mentions. Number 1, I'm going to give it to Oklahoma State. They found a way to come back after losing 2 games early in the season, headlined by Doak Walker Award winner Ollie Gordon. Alan Bowman was sufficient enough as a quarterback, passing balls to Rashad Owens and Brennan Presley. But the ability to trust number 0 to turn it upfield and get 6 points was phenomenal. Mike Gundy still reigns supreme in the Big 12. He still is, I think, the precipice of what you look for in coaching. I believe that the Pokes are going to be fine next year. Very good overall solidified team. Next up, LSU. They don't win 9 games without Jaden Daniels. There's a reason why number 5 won the Heisman Trophy, because he changed the course of an outcome on countless occasions. That defense was so filled with holes, you could put it on a sandwich and call it a Cuban. That's how bad this defense was. On the flip side, the offense was about as phenomenal as you could ask for it. Number 1 in total yards, top 5 in passing. You had 2 exceptional receivers in Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. But the good news is Brian Kelly knows how to win. Another 10-win season down in Baton Rouge. More importantly, he went out and he added in a difference maker at defensive coordinator with Blake Baker. I think that the moves that were added in this offseason are going to benefit this team. And if you want to take anything away, Garrett Nussmeier does look like the future of this organization. They're in good hands heading into 2024. Next up, Penn State. Once again, we know what they are. We know what they're supposed to be. Good defensively. They have opportunities on offense to capitalize. They know how to run the football extremely well. But in the big time games, once again, they crumbled. You weren't able to go ahead and surpass a team like Ohio State. You weren't able to get past a team like Michigan. They ran it up you sideways, slantways, forwards, backwards, up, down, left, right, back, center for literally the entire second half, and you had no answers. And even though you had opt-outs in this game, you didn't put on the best performance against Ole Miss. That really was a heartbreaking moment for me. It's a pivotal year for James Franklin going into 2024. I do love the addition of Andy Kolenicki, even though he's more so known for working with mobile quarterbacks. Hopefully he'll get the best version of Drew Aller. You added in a hopeful number 1 receiver in Julian Fleming. There are still bright days ahead for those that reside in State College, but you definitely left a little bit more meat on the bone. Next up, Oklahoma. Oklahoma found a way to establish an identity defensively with Brent Venables. There was a lot of high moments throughout the year. At one point, they had a top 20 defense. They led the country in turnover rate. They had a very stable quarterback with the guy in Dylan Gabriel. But just make no mistake, when you lose a quarterback, that's because you have someone waiting in the wings that's very promising. I do believe the Jackson Arnold era is going to be bountiful in the SEC. There was a lot of miscues, but make no mistake, don't fall for the bull syndrome trap. Just because you had one bad performance does not mean you are a bad quarterback. And I do think that with time, with the names that were coming back, Billy Bowman being one, I think when you look at also what you're going to add in via the portal, you recently added in an offensive lineman. Maybe you'll go out and add in another premier wide receiver in the coming weeks. This is a team that still can control its pathway to maybe 10 wins in a college football playoff in Norman as first-year members of the SEC. And last but not least, Ohio State. Ohio State was a very good team, but I don't think we are appreciating how special Marvin Harrison Jr. is. Case in point, you lose against Penn State if you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr. The bottom line was that one team had MHJ and the other team didn't. Kyle McCord, fine quarterback. I definitely think that you want to upgrade. I understand the reasoning why you want to pivot. And in every single offseason, when you aren't able to get the goals accomplished, beat Michigan, that probably leads to change in some capacity. But the good news, I do like Will Howard for this offense. You recently added in Quinshon Judkins going into 2024. There is optimism. A lot of players are potentially coming back. Ryan Day is born on third base. We can all say that that was the thing. But tell me who you're upgrading from. Tell me who's coming in and doing a better job than Ryan Day after the spectacle he has put on the last several seasons in Columbus. He is a good coach. You got to give him, I think, one more year before you really determine what is the outcome. It's a pivotal year, but there's a lot of intrigue and optimism going into Ohio Stadium for 2024. All right, number 10, Arizona. The feel-good story in college football last year. Nobody knew who Jedd Fisch was when he was hired in Tucson. Nobody knew what Jedd Fisch was able to accomplish. And the thing that I love about this Wildcats team, they are the epitome of what you want to see from a program. Consistent growth to set the tone. First year, 1-11. Next year, 5-7. This year, first 10-win season in 7 years, only the second 10-win season since the 1990s. This offense finished top 20. You had a breakout year from T-Mac. You had an exceptional year with Noah Fifita as your starting quarterback, replacing Jaden Deloria of all people. That's going to be a favorite to win the Heisman. Top 40 defense. 5 of your returning star tacklers are coming back next season. Your defense is going to be fundamentally sound. I know you lost your coordinator to Texas this past offseason, but make no mistake. You have the right coach. You have a great identity. You're retaining a crap load of talent. You're going to be a favorite to win the Big 12 in year one of your presence. And a lot of people, I think, are going to be paying attention to the Wildcats. Don't consider them a sleeper to make the college football playoff. Consider them a sleeper to win the whole damn thing. This team is very potent, and it's very promising moving forward. Number 9, it's tough. There was a lot of ways I could have gone with this one, but I ended up going with Missouri. Missouri, to me, had the better defense than Ole Miss, but the offense, they meshed pretty well. One team was better when it came to the run defense. One team was better when it came to the pass defense. So ultimately, it was kind of a toss-up, but I do think that what stands out about the Tigers, their ability to adapt. Give a lot of credit to Eli Drinkwitz. Not many people realize that this past offseason, he made the direct decision to give up play calling and trust someone else to lead his offense. Kirby Moore comes in and immediately you start to flourish. Cody Schrader, one of the best feel-good stories in college football this year. D2 player, gets no offers when he comes out of Truman State, walks on, becomes a Doak Walker Award finalist, a Heisman finalist in the top 10 of voting. Guy ends up being the backbone for your team, but you also saw growth in so many different avenues. The defense took an incredible step forward, headlined by Blake Baker, which unfortunately won't be there next year, but you added in a lot of good defensive players that are going to fortify your team via the portal. Toriano Pride is going to be a boundary shutdown cornerback back in his home state. Caden Green, I think, is going to be phenomenal on the offensive line. You also added in a couple of linebackers that I really like. This offense is also really going to be established. There are going to be very few teams that retain as much personnel as the Tigers going into 2024. At this year, they were great. Luther Burden showed you he had the number one alpha dog mentality. I don't know if there was a better number 2 receiver in the SEC this year than Theo Weiss Jr. Guess what? He's strapping it back up. And the emergence of what you saw from Brady Cook, that has to give you a euphoric level of confidence going into 2024. He's back in the saddle. There's a proof of concept when it comes to the offense. Kirby Moore seems locked and loaded for another year. Eli Drinkwitz is only getting started in Columbia, and it starts by building off this offseason and an 11-win record. Next up, Ole Miss. They come in at number 8. Ole Miss is going to be a team on the rise going into 2024, but this year, definitely some struggles defensively. Definitely you had to trust your offense to carry the weight. They had to set the tone, and they always had to respond. But here's the good news. You styled up game plans that were always going to work. Quinshon Judkins, another 1,000-yard season. You also look at what you had with Trey Harris coming on over from Louisiana Tech. Again, proof of concept. The portal king knows what the portal giveth, and he takes it and he transforms it into something that people are going to be paying attention to. Caden Priestcorn comes on very strong down the stretch. Big time touchdown in the Egg Bowl, 2 touchdowns in the Peach Bowl. Jackson Dart, phenomenal growth from year 1 to year 2 in this offense. You also saw Ulysses Bentley step up in the run game. You also watched as Dayton Wade and Jordan Watkins had exceptional years. Defensively, you liked what you saw from the pass rush, one of your better years when it came to tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Big upgrade from what you had last season and what you're bringing into year 2 with Pete Golding. So a lot of optimism for Ole Miss. They are no longer sitting by idly and saying, we're cool with 11-win seasons. Our first 11-win season, I might add in. We're cool with beating up against the third team in the Big Ten. No, we want to go for the jugular. We want to handle business. They are coming and running and rolling all the way through the SEC offseason. They are going to be the media darling. I can tell you right now, in an early preseason top 25, you will not find them outside of the top 7. This is a team that means business thanks of what they did in the transfer portal. And sometimes odd couples attract. You don't always see the pretty girl go home with the gorgeous model. Sometimes she goes home with a random dude and you're just like, how does that work? Well, it's because it's Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin's the pretty girl and Oxford is the regular dude, but they're a match made in heaven and it's going to continue to flow all the way heading into 2024. Number 7, my apologies, Florida State. Let's just get this out of the way. Florida State at full speed is good enough to win a national title. They get Jordan Travis. They have him for the final 2 games. I don't think there's even a question about Florida State belonging. And if Georgia ends up actually beating Alabama in the SEC title game, I think actually Florida State does get in. Top 15 defense this past year. Exceptional performance from the transfers. Jared Verse had another great year. Fentrell Cypress on the outside had a great year. Offensively, they were fundamentally sound. They had some hiccups along the way. The Boston College game absolutely was one that you were holding your pearls. The Clemson game, you allow the Tigers to fight back in, but you had Keon Coleman. Imagine if he was standing with Dabo Swinney's roster. Maybe we'd be talking about Clemson not on the come down, but still emerging towards the mountaintop. This was a very good team. They have an offense that I think can be sustainable next year, even though you're losing Jaheim Bell, even though you're losing Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jordan Travis. As long as Mike Norvell is leading the charge, and as long as he's able to scour the transfer portal for exceptional talent, I do believe that Florida State will be a player in the college football playoff. I don't know if they'll go next year, but they'll always be hanging around inside that top 12 persona. Number 6, Oregon. Probably the best 2-loss team in the country that didn't play for a college football playoff. So what I mean by that is they were a 2-loss team during the regular season. They were fundamentally sound. This was about exactly the type of performance you wanted to set going into the Big Ten because you showed your strengths. You're great when it comes to the run play. You're great when it comes to trench warfare. They're built like a weird Frankenstein monster that we read in the Mary Shelley books back in the 1800s. Like you take a piece from the Pac-12, you take a little bit from the Big Ten, you take a little bit from the SEC, and it culminates in a roster that just consistently looked about as fundamentally sound every single time they strapped it up on Saturdays. And that performance, the ability to watch players not opt out in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty, showed their stuff one more time for that fan base, and then finish the year off 12-2. That's about as good as you can ask for. This is a team that's going to mean business going into next year. You retain Tez Johnson. You're bringing over Dylan Gabriel. Not to mention, you got Dante Moore waiting in the wings. This is what great coaches do. They establish an identity going into 3 years down the line, and they make sure they're always prepared. Not to mention, you could also land Evan Stewart. You've gained a top 10 recruiting class, and you're going to finish with probably a top 15 portal class. I like what Dan Lanning is heading into for year 3. He has the Ducks quacking their way all the way to at least, I would say, a top 10 ranking going into 2024. Number 5, Alabama. Alabama handled business against everybody in the SEC. Alabama defied the odds once they realized number 4 was our best asset. And is Jalen Milroe the most complete quarterback in college football? No. You absolutely would trade him in for multiple different passers. You absolutely would love to see somebody that maybe fits Tommy Rees's offense to where they don't have to change the personnel a little bit more. But it's a testament to Nick Saban. He's a crocodile. Adapt or die. Plain and simple. Crocodiles are still alive. Dinosaurs are dead. Nick Saban is the one that survived the meteor blast. And that's how he coaches every single week. Offensively, they didn't have a number 1 receiver. There were flaws in the line. There were definitely flaws in the defensive trench play. There were moments where you thought that the defense was going to collapse. The Arkansas game was honestly the one matchup where I had the fear shivering down my spine. But I can tell you this much. Alabama will always be here. They're always going to finish with the top 5 recruiting class so long as Nick Saban lives and breathes. They're always going to retain talent. They're always going to be able to have the replace, not retool type of mentality. And they're going to carry that weight going into next season. They beat Georgia. But would Georgia win in a 10-game matchup? I think so. I think Georgia would actually win probably 6-4 against Alabama, which is why I have them at number 5. I do think that there is a lot of optimism going into next season. You got to replace your coordinator with Kevin Steele, but you replace defensive talent like it's no one's business. And lo and behold, you'll do the exact same thing with a coordinator. Number 4, Texas. Texas, to me, finally stopped being Texas. This was a team that culminated in 3 years of consistent growth. Just like Arizona, they're just a year ahead. Look at the way that this team performed. Offensively, they were top 15 in total scoring. They were top 25. They were top 25 in rushing. They were top 30 in passing. They always carried the next man up mentality. It didn't matter that Quinn Ewers got hurt. They turned immediately to Malik Murphy and they said, here's your shot, kid. Make it count. And he delivered on both instances. There were struggles, and now he's going to Duke, and hopefully him and Manny Diaz can culminate and keep the Blue Devils hype at an all-time high in place of Mike Elko. Defensively, you saw the change. You'll watch this Pete Kwiatkowski and Jeff Choate, who's now going to Nevada to be the Wolfpack's head coach, transform this team into a sound unit up front. Front 7, top 5 run defense. One player in conference play rushed for over 100 yards, and it was a quarterback of all people. This was a team that handled business in the bright stage, and even though there were scares, they didn't Longhorn. Longhorning, of course, means that you fall apart in the lesser tier games. You had a scare against Houston, you had a scare against Wyoming, you had a scare against Kansas State, but you continued the pathway all the way to Arlington, securing your very last Big 12 title before you make the jump over to the SEC. And the talent that's coming back, the talent that was added in, Matthew Golden going to be stepping up. I think they'll add in probably one more wide receiver. You also have Trey Moore coming over at the AAC Defensive Player of the Year. Andrew Mbuka is a very solidified safety. He's going to fill in somewhere either for Catan Crawford or Jarian Thompson. Steve Sarkisian is the right guy to lead the charge. They finished with the top 5 recruiting class. This team could be special in year 1 in the SEC. Speaking of the SEC, number 3, it's Georgia. You can't tell me, going back, looking at this roster, top to bottom, I get it. It was flawed defensively. You can't tell me that this team was not good enough to play for a college football playoff spot, because Vegas would have told you that. If we listened to Vegas and we just said, let's just take what they think are the teams that are going to be the most compelling, Georgia easily would have been the number 2 seed. Didn't matter that they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. They were that sound throughout the regular season. Good rushing attack. Offensively, they stepped up big. It felt like Carson Beck was floating on cloud 9 every single week. Like this was the moment he'd come back down to reality. Nope. Instead, he throws for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and has 1 interception. Or the next week, he throws for 275 yards and 4 touchdowns. It didn't matter. They game planned it. They executed. It was a huge testament to Mike Bobo to trusting this offense to pave the way. And once again, here they are. Number 1 recruiting class. They've added in more talent via the portal. They're going to be a team that now fortifies their rushing attack with the addition of Trevor Etienne. I like Georgia's chances. 29 games in a row you won. You lose one and you kept out of the college football playoff. To me, at the end of the day, they were the 3rd best team in college football. Number 2, Washington. Underdog mentality, alpha dog persona. That's the way that I will remember this Washington team. They didn't care about any outside noise. They could care less what people thought about this roster. They didn't care about what you thought about the schedule. They didn't care about what you thought about the insufficiencies on offense at times. They didn't care about the defensive miscues. They found ways to buy in belief and carry that every single Saturday. They beat Oregon, a game where they were underdogs. They beat Utah, a game where they were underdogs. They handled business against USC, primarily on the ground with Dylan Johnson, who will not get enough credit for what he did this past season in the Pac-12. They beat Oregon State in ridiculous conditions. Not even Mother Nature herself wanted to be out there. They beat Oregon a second time in a neutral site location. And then when you go playing against Texas, everyone talks about how the Longhorns are almost BACK. And Washington said, NOPE, we still mean business. Michael Penix Jr. balled out. The kid may not have won the Heisman. he may not have won the national championship, but you built a statue outside of Husky Stadium of him, because what he was able to accomplish with a brand new coaching staff, changing formations, changing personnel looks, revamping the roster basically overnight, retaining some players, watching others leave via the portal, having to sell that Kalen DeBoer knew what he was doing as a proven winner. It doesn't happen without a solidified quarterback. He now has Washington better prepared for the Big Ten than ever before. And you have to give it credit where credit's due. As much as we talk about Kalen DeBoer being 25-3 as a starter, as a head coach, Michael Penix was 25-3 as a starter during his tenure with the likes of the Huskies. Roma Dunze should have easily been a Heisman finalist. In my opinion, he could have won the Biletnikoff Award. You have superstar talent that could return. You have talent that could go pro. It was a special season in Seattle. Take nothing away from them. They always carried themselves with the pedigree of keep doubting us. We don't care what you think. But number one, clear cut, it's the reigning victors. It's Michigan. Michigan this past year, I get it. The sign stealing scandal is going to always be attached to their name, but I can tell you this much. Nobody in Ann Arbor is going to care. You can put an asterisk next to their name if you're the NCAA. They're going to celebrate it like it's Y2K. They don't care. They won the national championship because they were an elite team. They had an identity. The identity was solidified from the very jump. And I think Michigan right now might be the baseline of what you look at when it comes to solidifying a roster and what you need. You can have great quarterback play. You can have exceptional wide receivers. You can have a good tight end. You can have an elite secondary. You can have playmakers on the back end stepping up in critical moments, but you have to win in the trenches. Your bread and butter in the world of college football starts with the 5 men up front and the 4 men on the other side. Whoever wins that battle 9 times out of 10 wins the game. And that's what happened. That's what happened every single game this past season. They were able to corral quarterbacks like Kyle McCord. They were able to get in the backfield against Talia Tagovailoa. They were able to make the offense for Penn State one-dimensional. And they did all this while dealing with outside noise. And it would have been so easy for Michigan at any point this season to crumble, whether it be from Burgergate or from the sign stealing scandal, Connor Stallions playing Halloween back in August, Jim Harbaugh claiming that we're innocent, the rumors about him going back to the NFL, the NCAA now saying you can't coach on the sidelines for 3 games. They could have handled anything, including in the national championship. Well, we haven't gone up against an offense like Washington. Well, we haven't seen a passing attack or a quarterback like Penix sling it around the yard against us. Any excuse could have been used. But no, instead, handle business, carry out orders, and they live up to the hype of Michigan against anybody. And this is why when you look at a team like Michigan, that's what you look for in championship mentalities, where your coaches are simply just babysitters and those inside the locker room take over. It had been 3 years in the making since 2021 when Harbaugh went back to his roots. Bully football, establish dominance inside the trenches, and let us win by knocking you the hell out. It culminated on Monday night with the national championship. But there you have it. Those are my top 10 teams for 2023. Number 1, Michigan. Number 2, Washington. Number 3, and no surprise here, it's Georgia. Number 4, Texas. Number 5, Alabama. Number 6, Oregon. Number 7, Florida State. Number 8, Ole Miss. Number 9, Missouri. And number 10, the feel-good story in college football. And the Wildcats are coming to the Big 12, and they're going to make a name for themselves. Arizona rounds out our list. Hey, guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.